Okay, so imagine you're black. This is a bit more chessy now. Right? It's a bit less psychological. You know, I do have those bugbears that we've been talking about for the last half hour, but it's not all empty. So if that kind of stuff either irritates you or doesn't interest you, there's still a lot in the book that's interesting for you, I hope. The sort of second part of the book is just mainly the positions that have made the biggest impression on me in the last few years. And they are organized fairly thematically with some sort of theorizing along the way, but it's mainly good chess positions. So this is one of them that made a very big impression on me. Looks pretty grim for black, right? You don't have to be particularly strong to realize that. He's a pawn down, white has more space. It looks like white's going to play a few moves, maybe, I don't know, maybe king g2, perhaps something like maybe queen c2 and knight d4 to exchange queens, or maybe knight a5 is coming, but it doesn't look like black has that much hope. It looks like it'll take a few moves to consolidate and then white will win. Right? So your task, should you choose to accept it, is what should black do? I don't expect you to find the move. Those who have read the book will know the move, and they should definitely keep quiet now, because they don't want to spoil it. But do you see any hope at all? That's the question. Do you see anything whatsoever that gives you a glimmer? And then if you see a glimmer, then I want you to work on that glimmer and see if you can make it anything more. So does anyone see a glimmer? Does anyone see a sort of hint of an idea for black? Yep.
I'd quite like to go c5.
You'd like to go c5. What's your idea? So say I take the knight.
Okay, now I take with the bishop.
Take the queen.
Okay, and then I'm basically going to try and activate my queen, go queen d1 check.
Good. Okay, so I go king h2.
Maybe queen e2.
Right. Bishop d4 maybe, I'm not sure. But you've activated your queen, but at some cost, right?
Right.
It's two whole pawns now, and they're running pretty fast. And unless you can do something quickly. But that's a glimmer, and that's what I'm getting at. It's a sign of, it's a sort of sniff of activity. And that's what you have to work with. You have to work with your hunches. So to sort of dig deep into positions, you have to push against those kind of little failures and try and make them little successes. So c5 doesn't quite work. What went wrong there? c5, knight takes, bishop takes, queen d1 check. So that's c5, knight takes, bishop takes, queen d1 check, king h2. And white's safe. Okay. Any idea that line could be improved a little bit? Good. Nor should you have, because it's utterly ingenious what happens next. Keith Arkell's playing black, and Keith probably, I'm being recorded now, so I should be careful what I say, but Keith has an immense amount of talent, and it shows itself at certain moments. He doesn't always show it, and is vulnerable in certain ways, but at times like this, his understanding of chess sort of shines through. Keith played this move. G5. Which looks utterly bizarre. And in fact, as I say in the book, G5 is a great example of why Kotov's fabled tree of analysis is not really the truth. Because G5 could never be a candidate move, because it just looks utterly barmy. There's seemingly no method, no logic to it at first. It only makes any sense when you actually dig under the position and see what's really going on. It looks like it loses a pawn, weakens the king, so you wouldn't have it as a candidate move. But the reason it makes some sort of sense is because the way we think is we get a few ideas and then we try and improve them. And c5, we saw knight takes, bishop takes, queen d1 check. The reason king h2 is the end of the story is there was no check on the h-file. If you imagine this, and in the same line, the king's not safe on h2, right? Even more ingenious is, what if the king goes to g2? Can anyone see from this position? It's part of some chess vision. But can you see, if g5 takes, c5 take, queen d1, if king goes to g2, why isn't it safe there? There's no check on the g file.
What is it?
Well, it looks like the pawns are covering f4 and e3 with a knight might go.
Potential d5 check.
Knight.
The potential d5 check. Once you can,
There's a potential d5 check with the queen, right? You have to act pretty fast. Well, that's maybe, I don't want to mislead anyone. So try and hold that position in your head. This is also, by the way, the heart of what chess improvement's about. If it's not comfortable for you to try and hold this position in your mind, push a little bit, basically. Try and hold it in your mind, and then hold it so it's firm enough that you can begin to operate on it.
Sorry, John, what's the sequence again?
Okay, the sequence is g5, pawn takes, seemingly pointless loss of the pawn, right? c5, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes, queen d1 check, king g2. Now if you can hold that in your head, I want you to ask what happens next. The king can't go to h2, well, he can go to h2, but there's a check on h5. But why is this relevant at all? Why can't it just sit on g2? Knight e3 check, queen takes e3. Yeah.
Queen g4.
When?
Afterwards.
You could go, okay, queen g4 immediately is a decent try, but let's say I play queen b4 or something. Yep. Knight f4 check, good. And what's the idea? Good, perpetual check. So from this position, Keith has seen perpetual check. And that is a remarkable feat of conjuring. I mean, that's really a mixture of sort of genius and desperation put together. Makes a sort of toxic combination.
Did you just run through it?
Yeah, of course, no, I'm not. I definitely run through it. I mean, the
You
reason.
just showed moves because there are difficulty with starting.
Of course you do. Everyone does. I do.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's like several moves deep and very seemingly bizarre ideas of g5 and perpetual check in a position where those things don't seem to be in the equation at all. And I will run through them right now. But vision is everything in chess. Seeing these ideas ahead of time is what it's all about. And if you get a chess book and this position set up, and you play through g5 and what we're about to see, and you read it and nod and go, wow, that's amazing, wow, great, great, great. You learn almost nothing. Right? You'll see one interesting position and you'll congratulate yourself for adding to your stock of patterns. You won't improve. I mean, you improve maybe like a minuscule amount, and that will be lost by, a little bit later by the opening theory you forgot or whatever. What will improve you is pushing up against the edges of your comfort zone. If you're struggling to see that final position, you should be, because it's very hard. Push up against the edges of your comfort zone. That's when your mind begins to stretch a little bit. And that's what I mean in this book about the difference between passively reading, developing building up your knowledge of chess, which has its place but doesn't really improve you, and working on your skill. And your skill is really what it's all about. It's your know-how that matters. It's your capacity to sort of visualize things at the board and to make the right decisions on the basis of what you see. So you're trying to develop your vision. So if you take away one thing from tonight, take away that. Do not just read and nod. Make yourself think, as you have to think over the board. That's by far the most important message of the first part of the book. Right? And it's not easy. People would much rather read and nod. It's so much easier. You have a TV on, you can listen to music, you can read and nod to your heart's content and think you're improving your chess, but you're not. You're just kidding yourself. You're just adding new positions to the thousands that you've read before. The only thing that really improves you is when you actually develop your intellectual muscles a bit. And that involves positions like this, struggling with it, thinking, what on earth's going on there? G5, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And then trying to piece it together for yourself. And it's so much more rewarding as well. It's much harder, and it's difficult to do. But if you start setting up the position, preferably with a clock, and giving yourself these tasks, you will improve. But it's very hard, because it's not comfortable. You're actually face to face with your own weakness. And that's not easy for anyone to do. Before I show you this, just as another story, I mentioned somewhere in the book that I worked with Yusupov for a week. And that was the most, just to clarify, he was very, very hospitable, friendly, warm-hearted guy. But that week working with Yusupov was the most systematic pounding of my ego I've ever had. Before, I've never had anything like it since. Because I was constantly given positions a bit like this and asked to solve them. And I realized that I just didn't have what it took to sort of go right through them and try and visualize everything along the way. But the grueling process sort of paid off. I mean, a few weeks later, I was first equal in the World Open. And it was a direct result of that kind of work, because I just felt this capacity to break down barriers that were there before. But it's not easy work. It's not a coach telling you to, put your pawn this way and not that way. It's not, Nimzovich blockading theory. It's actually exercising your mental muscles. And that's what makes you improve. I don't think anything else really does. I mean, things do a little bit. I don't want to sound too dogmatic about it. Opening theory does matter. Knowing some endings matters. But by far the most important thing, the underlying dynamic for all improvement, is making yourself think and think better. Okay? So with that little lecture aside, G5, an astounding move. Pawn takes, C5. Now, at this point, White woke up to what was happening. White's the strong grandmaster as well. He's about 25-50 or so strength. And he realized this beautiful detail. That he apparently, when he played G5, he just sort of looked a bit contemptful and just took it and pressed the 12. And then Keith just went to C5. And then he sort of went into the tank and realized he had some problems. He played now, I won't actually concentrate on the game, because the game was actually a draw. Because what Keith managed to do is to get rid of this weakness for these two pawns. And then it became a 4v3 issue on this side of the board. And it can quite quickly become a 3 against 2 issue as well, because you can exchange this pawn. So, although Black's still a lot worse, his defensive task is now sort of manageable. There is a real chance of drawing the game. But the most interesting thing in the position is the main line, so I'll show you the main line. Knight takes, bishop takes knight, queen takes knight, queen d1 check. Now, if you just go back a second, like this, we had this a minute ago, and White was going king h2, and there was no real follow-up. I mean, you can play around a little bit, but there's not enough for the two pawns. The two pawns will just run. But with this position, it's a different story, because now there's a queen h5 check. And that's the genius of g5. That's what keeps up through the g5. And now the king goes back to g1, queen d1 check. And if you go to g2, whether you do it here or with the queen on d1, it doesn't matter. The same principle applies. Black goes knight f4 check. And now, okay, if you want to be cooperative, you can run into mate. But more likely you'll take the knight and perpetual check. On nation g5 check, 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 and never go to f1, queen d1 check happen. So that, came out from a few moves before with g5. Now, how does the player go about seeing g5? I mean, even when you see it, you might think, I would never think of that. I mean, I had that impression, like g5. Now I can just about imagine playing it. Because like I say, it's born of a feeling of, you see c5 almost working, and you get frustrated. And you think, well, if I don't get c5 then I lose. So if I can't find a move here, I might as well resign. And that's when you maybe look for things that are a bit out of the ordinary. But g5. And that's in the chapter, why shouldn't I be defensive? Which is more about a more positive appraisal than defending. Because my impression is that the bulk of chess books and magazines are focused on attacking, tactics, opening theory. And chess is much more. If you learn to enjoy defending, it makes you so much stronger. Because you can defend from good positions. Just because you're defending, it doesn't mean you're worse. Not at all. And g5 is an example of sort of beautiful defense, when defense becomes a kind of art form. Okay, one last position.